Warning: some of the materials and photographs used in this movie are not for the faint of heart.
There is one killer who is known all over the world. His heinous crimes and the fact he was never caught inspired multiple generations. Books have been written, films made, and even in science fiction, this killer comes back in the future, either as an immortal or as an alien entity. But we're not here to fantasize. We want the facts and to speculate about down-to-earth possibility. So let's start this quest. This is the series where I tell you a story, its subsequent theories and explanations, and then I let you make up your mind. Today we try to find the identity of the most infamous serial killer in the history of man, Jack the Ripper. He was active in the impoverished parts in and around the Whitechape district of London and became known as Jack the Ripper because of a letter by someone claiming to be the killer. It is, however, widely believed to be a hoax written by journalists to heighten interest in the story. The victims were female prostitutes who lived in the slums. Their throats were cut and their organs removed with what seemed surgical precision. Rumors of a connection between the murders intensified in September and October of 1888 as George Lusk from the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee received the From Hell letter, which contained half of a preserved human kidney purportedly taken from one of the victims. The extensive newspaper coverage and international notoriety solidified the legend of the Ripper. The police were unable to connect 11 brutal Whitechapel murders up to 1891. So we are left with the canonical 5 murdered between the 31st of August and the 9th of November in 1888. Through genuine historical research, folklore and pseudo-history, the unsolved murders became legend and the study and analysis of the Ripper case became known as Ripperology. Over 100 theories exist today about the Ripper's identity. The first 2 victims in a string of brutal attacks on women in Whitechapel are not included in the canonical 5. Emma Elizabeth Smith was robbed and sexually assaulted on April 3rd and said she was attacked by 3 men before dying in the hospital. On August 7th, Martha Tabram was stabbed 39 times rather than slashed at the throat and abdomen. On the 31st of August, Mary Ann Nichols had the questionable honor to be the Ripper's first victim. Her throat was cut twice and abdomen partially ripped open. Saturday the 8th, Annie Chapman's body was discovered near a doorway. Throat slashed twice, abdomen ripped open entirely and the uterus removed. A witness saw Chapman with a black-haired man of shabby genteel appearance. Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes were killed Sunday morning, September 30th. Stride's body was found with a clear-cut incision severing the main artery on the left side of the neck. The absence of mutilations to the abdomen has led to uncertainty about whether Stride's murder should be attributed to the Ripper or whether he was interrupted during the attack. Edo's body was found, throat cut, abdomen ripped open, kidney and part of the uterus missing. Part of Edo's bloodied apron was found at the entrance of a tenement in Golston Street, Whitechapel. Graffito on the wall above it. Uncertain it was done by the killer, it was washed away before dawn out of fear for anti-Semitic riots. Mary Jane Kelly's mutilated and disemboweled body was discovered lying on the bed on November 9th, her throat severed down to the spine and abdomen emptied of organs. The heart was missing too. The canonical five were killed at night, in or near the weekend, and the mutilation became increasingly brutal. Several other alleged victims were never definitively linked to Jack the Ripper. The surviving files on the Ripper murders give a nice view of the investigative procedures in the Victorian era. Through house-to-house inquiries, more than 2,000 people were interviewed, forensic material was collected and examined. Over 300 suspects were identified, traced and examined, and 80 people were detained. The initial research was done by the Criminal Investigation Department, CID, of the Metropolitan Police Department, the Whitechapel Division, led by Inspector Edmund Reed. But they got help from Scotland Yard after the Nichols murder. The Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, a group of volunteer citizens, patrolled the streets dissatisfied with the police effort. Because of the mutilations, butchers, slaughterers, surgeons and physicians were suspected. Boats docking on Thursday or Friday and departing on Saturday or Sunday on the London docks were also investigated. Thomas Bond wrote the earliest surviving offender's profile, stating that the murders were committed by the same hand. Most of the throats were cut from left to right, and the women were laying down during the murders. Bond was opposed to the idea that the murderer had any kind of scientific or anatomical knowledge. He also believed it was a solitary man with periodical attacks of homicidal mania who derived sexual pleasure from the attacks. Some of his views are dismissed by others as insupportable supposition. This is a long list, so we better get to it. Montague John Druitt, a Dorset-born barrister, possibly homosexual, possibly suffering from mental health problems, committed suicide shortly after the last canonical murder. Assistant Chief Constable Sir Melville McNaughton named him as a suspect but incorrectly described him as a doctor, and he was playing cricket in Dorset when the first murder occurred. Suren Antonovich Kolowski, alias George Chapman, immigrated from Poland and lived in Whitechapel at the time of the murders. He was hanged in 1903 for successfully poisoning of 3 of his wives and is considered a viable suspect. Aaron Kozbinski was a Polish Jew who was admitted to the Colney Hedge Lunatic Asylum in 1891. He lived in Whitechapel, however was harmless in the asylum as his insanity was described as auditory hallucinations, refusal to wash or bathe, and self-abuse. His character also suggested he would have boasted about the murders. Michael Ostrog, a Russian-born conman who claimed he was once a surgeon in the Navy, was considered but he was allegedly in a French prison during the murders. John Pizer, or Pizer, was a Polish Jew and Whitechapel bootmaker known as the Leather Apron, another nickname for the Ripper. Had a prior conviction for a stabbing offense and allegedly committed a string of minor assaults on prostitutes. He had alibis for 2 of the murders, however. James Thomas Sadler was a friend of Francis Coles, the last victim of the Whitechapel murders in 1891, who was considered. However, he was at sea for 4 of the canonical murders. Francis Tumblety, who posed as an Indian herb doctor, but was commonly perceived as a quack, and who was arrested as an alleged accomplice in the murder of none other than Abraham Lincoln, was also arrested on the 7th of November in Whitechapel for homosexuality, illegal at the time. He was considered a suspect, but no proof could be found of this. William Henry Bury, who moved to Dundee shortly after the last canonical murder, confessed to murdering his wife Ellen Elliot, a former prostitute, on the 4th of February 1889. He had inflicted extensive wounds to her abdomen, but always denied being the Ripper. Thomas Hayne Cutbush, a medical student, suffering from delusions, possibly brought on by syphilis, was declared insane and committed to the Broadmoor Hospital in 1891 for stabbing and trying to stab women. His possible connection to the Ripper murders was denied by police. However, in 1995, it was discovered that Cutbush's uncle was a fellow police officer. Frederick Bailey Deeming murdered his first wife and 4 children and fled to Australia, where he murdered his second wife. In jail, he boasted to be Jack the Ripper, though he was thought to be either imprisoned or in South Africa at the time of the Ripper murders. Some believe, however, there is some evidence that he was free and in England at said time. Carl Ferdinand Feigenbaum was a merchant seaman arrested in 1894 for cutting the throat of Mrs. Juliana Hoffman. His lawyer William Sanford Lawton claimed after his execution that Feigenbaum admitted to having a hatred of women and a desire to murder and mutilate them. He furthermore said he believed Feigenbaum to be responsible for the Ripper murders and others in the US and Germany. There is no proof, however, Feigenbaum was even in Whitechapel during the murders. Robert Donston Stephenson, also known as Rosalind Donston, a writer and journalist interested in black magic and the occult, admitted himself as a patient at the London hospital shortly before the murders began and was released shortly after the murders stopped. His strange matters resulted in an amateur detective reporting him to Scotland Yard. Stephenson could not have left the hospital at night, however, and he himself put Dr. Morgan Davis forward as a possible suspect. A century after the murders, author Bruce Paley proposed Joseph Barnett as a suspect. After having been Mary Kelly's lover, he supposedly committed the other murders to scare Kelly off the streets and out of prostitution. He was investigated for Kelly's murder and released. Ripperologist Martin Fido claimed the Polish man, simply known as David Cohen, might be the Ripper. He was incarcerated at Colney Hatch Lunatic Asylum and deemed extremely violent and antisocial. He was possibly called Nathan Kaminsky, confused by police as Kominsky, resulting in the wrong accusation of Aaron Kominsky, whom we discussed earlier. Sir William Whitley Gull, physician in ordinary to the Queen, has been named as a suspect with regard to the Masonic royal conspiracy theory. Popular with fiction writers, this is used in many a book and film. However, no real evidence exists of this, and moreover, he was in his 70s at the time of the murders and had recently suffered a stroke. George Hutchinson, an unemployed laborer, made a statement to the police of witnessing a man of conspicuous appearance following and watching Mary Kelly to her room. Some suggest Hutchinson was the Ripper himself, trying to confuse police with his statement. Charles Allen Lechmere, also known as Charles Cross, is generally regarded as an innocent witness who discovered the body of Mary Ann Nichols, also known as Polly. Journalist Kristen Holmgren believes Lechmere to be the Ripper based on the fact that he lied to the police on the scene, and both he and his mother lived in the streets where the Ripper murders occurred. Jacob Levy, a butcher who lived in the middle of Ripper territory with his family, contracted syphilis from a prostitute and may have been out for revenge. Alexander Pedachenko was named in the memoirs of one William Lequeux, who claimed to have seen a French manuscript written by Rasputin, claiming Pedachenko was a member of the Okhrana, the secret Imperial Russian police, committing the murders to discredit Scotland Yard. Upon investigation, however, this story falls apart and there isn't even evidence Pedachenko ever existed. Sir John Williams, obstetrician to Princess Beatrice, allegedly knew all the victims personally and killed and mutilated them to research causes for infertility with a badly blunted surgical knife. Upon scrutinization, this story also falls apart. We've discussed some theories that seem crazy. However, I left the best for last. Dr. Thomas Neil Cream, Glasgow-born abortion specialist, was serving a prison term during the Whitechape murders for poisoning his mistress's husband. When he was hanged for resuming his killings after his release in 1891, he allegedly muttered, "I am Jack the..." Some people believe he bribed officials and left prison early, having a look-alike take his place. Cream's solicitors, Cream's family, and in retrospect, Cream himself gave evidence to the contrary, however. Walter Richard Stickert, an artist who admittedly made creepy paintings of women, has been put forward as a suspect. He had a morbid fascination with the murders and even lodged in a room supposedly used by the real Ripper. No evidence exists, and he might have been in France for most of the murders. Lewis Carroll, author of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, was named a suspect based on some unlikely anagrams supposedly used in his children's books. No scholar deems this claim valid, however. Mary Piercy is the only woman implicated in the Whitechapel murders. She was convicted of murdering her lover's wife, and Arthur Conan Doyle speculated she could run around with a bloody apron if she claimed to have been a midwife. But as in many cases, evidence is next to non-existent. To remain. Prince Albert Victor, Duke of Clarence and Avondale, is mentioned as a suspect. He was infected with syphilis and it drove him mad. In another version, he had a child with a shop girl called Annie Crook, and everybody who knew was quickly and quietly disposed in a series of killings so grisly and high profile we are still talking about them. We're staying close to Prince Albert Victor, as James Kenneth Stephen, a poet and one of Victor's tutors, allegedly was a homosexual and in love with the prince. His hatred for women stemmed from the fact that Victor preferred female company. Going even a step further, they were supposedly lovers and depicted the prince as the murderer. Frank Spearing believes that private notes of another suspect, Dr. William Gull, held in the library of the New York Academy of Medicine, state that Prince Victor confessed under hypnosis and subsequently died of an overdose of morphine ordered by Prime Minister Lord Salisbury and possibly Albert Victor's own father, Edward VII of the United Kingdom. Spearing denied access to the files upon investigation. What happened to the Ripper after 1888, and why did the murder stop? On the 24th of April 1891, the body of prostitute Carrie Brown was found in a cheap hotel in New York City. She was viciously murdered, her stomach cut open and her intestines were strewn all over the room. She was even missing some female intestines. 3 more murders similar to this one were committed in 11 days after that. Could this have been the Ripper? It is an historical fact that members from Scotland Yard visited New York to see if the murders could be connected to the Ripper. Are there any suspects we can connect to both sprees? James Kelly was committed to the Broadmoor Asylum, deemed insane after fatally stabbing his wife in the neck. He escaped with a self-made key in early 1888 and purportedly escaped to America after the last canonical murder. He left a journal in which he also spoke of his strong disapproval of the immorality of prostitutes. Retired NYPD cold case detective Ed Norris researched the case at length, including Kelly's files in the Broadmoor Asylum, concluding that his profile is the perfect match for Jack the Ripper. James Maybrick, a Liverpool cotton merchant, is accused by authors Charlie Harrison of being both Jack the Ripper and the servant girl annihilator of Austin, Texas. In a diary published by Michael Barrett, he confessed to being the Ripper. Later, Barrett confessed to having forged the diary. After their divorce, and Barrett denied the forgery, and their story changed several times after that. Historians pointed out factual errors to some crimes, and documents experts find no similarity between the diary and Maybrick's will. Whoa! Yes, we're finished. There's supposedly more theories, however, and some even believe the murders were committed by different people. We may never know the truth, but for now, you decide. Did you like the video? Click the like button. Leave comments or start a discussion in the comment box. If you want to see more, you can subscribe to my channel. I have a vlog channel, so if you want to get bored, why don't you check it out? And you can follow me on social media. All links in the description. See you next time!